Hey, haven't you moved out already?
You're always so slow. The movers will be here in an hour. My husband and his affair partner grinned and kicked me out. A week later, the doorbell rang, and when I answered it, they were there. How did they know where I was? But I did my best to pretend I didn't care. Hey, you! What did you do?
What in the world are we talking about?
My name is Claire, a 38-year-old housewife. My husband Alan and I have been married for 10 years. I guess this year we're supposed to celebrate our 10th anniversary. But for me, I am amazed that I have endured it for 10 years. That is how hard it has been for me. The reason I felt that way was because I had to endure all the bullying from my parents-in-law.
Hey, bring me my coffee.
Yes, right away.
Claire, haven't you washed the bathtub yet? You haven't even finished weeding the garden. You're such a dawdler.
I'm sorry. Soon after my husband and I got married, we started living with my parents-in-law. He wouldn't listen to me, saying that eldest son should live with his parents. We are newlyweds, so maybe for the first year or two, we could...
Don't be so selfish. Mom and Dad are the ones who want us to live with them, and it would be a good opportunity for you to learn how to do housework too. Anyway, we are going to live together, okay?
That's what my husband said to me after we got married, and he couldn't tell me this before we got married. But I still loved my husband, so I agreed to move in with him, even though I felt it was unfair. And so, I was to live at my parents-in-law's house. Jacob and Debbie, I'm looking forward to living with you from today.
Yes, us as well.
On my first day at the house, my parents-in-law were very kind and greeted me with warm smiles. So I thought I would be able to enjoy my life living with them. However, my expectations were soon betrayed. The next day, my in-laws immediately started to bully me.
Hey, how long are you going to stay in bed?
My mother-in-law woke me up angrily with a devilish look on her face. I hurriedly checked the time on my phone, and it was only 5:30. It's only 5:30.
So what? Do you really think you can do all your chores if you wake up later?
I had no idea what my mother-in-law meant, but I soon came to understand.
First, you must make breakfast for our family, pancakes for Jacob and cereal for me. You need to make salads and cook some eggs for each of us too. You will also make Alan's lunch for him to bring in a lunchbox.
With such detailed instructions, I would certainly have to get up early in the morning. I tried my best to make breakfast for my in-laws and the lunch for my husband, even though I was still sleepy. But when it was time for breakfast, my in-laws were furious for some reason.
What is this breakfast?
What?
I just had scrambled eggs yesterday. You can't make me eat the same thing 2 days in a row. Claire, you have to make something different every day.
I'm sorry, but I didn't know what my father-in-law had for breakfast because I arrived yesterday afternoon. I was shocked because their reason of anger was unreasonable, and when I glanced at my husband, he seemed to have no interest in me at all and was munching on his own breakfast while watching TV. I was extremely saddened that he would not protect his wife as a husband. My in-laws continued to yell at me, and I couldn't even eat my own breakfast. Finally, when it was time for my father-in-law to leave for work, I was allowed to have my breakfast. My mother-in-law, watching me eat my cold breakfast by myself, asked,
"How long do you need to eat that? You really are slow."
I lost hope from the very first day. Why should I be treated like this? That night, when I was alone with my husband in the bedroom, I pleaded to him. "Do we have to live together? I can't stand the thought of living like this forever. My husband was startled as I said this in tears.
Don't be so hard on yourself. They're just checking to see if you have the guts by giving you a hard time at first. If they approve of you, I'm sure they'll both treat you nicely.
Really?
Of course. I'm sure you'll be accepted by them.
Okay, I'll do my best. My husband encouraged me with his words. My parents-in-law would someday approve of me. Believing this, I really tried my best to do all the chores expected at my in-laws' house. However, it did not go so well. My in-laws' demands were not consistent, and they often came in with unexpected requests. I would sometimes get confused, and my in-laws would get angry with me.
Oh my, why can't you do what you're told? You really are a dawdler.
I'm sorry. That's how my mother-in-law used to call me, a dawdler. I was sad, but my frustration surpassed my sadness. I was determined to do my housework perfectly and make my parents-in-law approve of me. I was filled with such motivation. It seems that I'm more competitive than I thought. So no matter how unreasonably they treated me, I endured it. Gradually, I stopped worrying about my in-laws' bullying. I began to see them as two barking dogs, if that's an appropriate way to put it. Therefore, the stress caused by my in-laws did not accumulate so much. On the other hand, however, I was troubled about my relationship with my husband. I had been married for about 3 years, and my husband had gradually lost interest in me and stopped communicating with me. He used to try to go out with me on our days off, and when we were alone in the bedroom at night, he would talk to me about various things and we would have a happy conversation. But recently, my husband has stopped talking to me at all. If I'm being bullied by my in-laws, he apparently doesn't want to get involved, so he disappears. When I tell him what happened at home that day, he doesn't seem to be interested at all. It seems like he has completely lost interest in me. I wondered if it was really okay to continue our marriage like this. While I was thinking about this, my father-in-law suddenly fell ill and passed away. We were both very upset by the suddenness of the situation. My mother-in-law was extremely depressed because she had suddenly lost her partner. Even though she had treated me badly, I could not leave her in this state, so I decided to support her. How are you feeling, Debbie?
Thank you for worrying about me. I'm feeling slightly better today.
My mother-in-law was no longer the bullying mother-in-law she had been. It was as if her heart had completely weakened and she didn't have the energy. So I decided to do many things to take care of her. I did all the housework, of course. I tried to buy her favorite snacks and sweets as much as possible. I even took her out to a cafe if she looked like she could go out. No matter how badly she treated me, the shock of losing someone you had been with for so many years must be immeasurable. As I treated my mother-in-law like that, she gradually got better. She started smiling more and started to do things by herself. And for the first time, my mother-in-law expressed her gratitude to me.
Claire, thank you. Thanks to you, I am back on my feet. I am sorry I've been such a jerk to you.
It's okay, Debbie. I hope we can support each other. At that moment, I felt as if I could have a heart-to-heart talk with my mother-in-law. After that, the bullying stopped completely. And so I was able to build a good relationship with my mother-in-law.
I remember when I first got married, I thought about running away because I felt it was too much work to cook a different type of egg dish every morning.
That's how my mother-in-law sometimes talked about my father-in-law. My father-in-law was a very strict man, so my mother-in-law was often forced to obey him. and she had come to think that was normal. However, with the death of her husband, her sense of values began to revert back to the value she had before she got married. Basically, my mother-in-law herself was not that meticulous. She was a person who felt that if she could do 70%, it was okay. But that changed when she got married and was under the guidance of her mother-in-law. My mother-in-law told me many stories, like how she and my father-in-law first met and how they were when they just got married. I enjoyed listening to her stories very much, and I was able to spend quality time with her. So I didn't mind that my relationship with my husband was not so good. However, after a few years passed, my mother-in-law's age gradually made it impossible for her to live as she wished. Her legs and back began to weaken, and she began to need frequent hospital visits. But even going to the hospital was reaching their limits, and she began to need a wheelchair to live. But then a problem arose. It was about the construction of my parents-in-law's house. Because it was an old house, there were many steps. The wheelchair's range of movement was very limited. This made life very difficult for my mother-in-law. When I was thinking about remodeling my parents-in-law's house, my parents made a suggestion. They were going to give up the house they were living in. My parents' house had originally been remodeled to barrier-free because my grandparents had lived there together. The house itself was new and only about 10 years old, as it had been fully remodeled. I felt bad that they had to give it away, but my parents had a dream to move to the countryside after retirement. They thought it would be a good opportunity to make it come true and suggested that they would give the house. I thought it would be good if it would be mutually beneficial in that way. I immediately made a proposal to my mother-in-law and my husband, and they were both very happy, and we moved right away. I was familiar with the house because it was my parents' house, and my mother-in-law seemed very comfortable because it was barrier-free. It was also relatively close to the company where my husband works, so commuting to work seemed easy for him. We were living a peaceful and tranquil life like that. Even if the relationship between me and my husband was not that great, I had already established a good relationship with my mother-in-law. So I felt that this kind of life was a reasonable way of living. However, 3 years after we started living there, my mother-in-law fell ill and had to be admitted to the hospital for an examination. The tests revealed that she was suffering from cancer. She was diagnosed as having terminal cancer and was given only 6 months to live. My mother-in-law was to spend the rest of her days in the hospital room. I went to visit her every day so that she would not feel lonely. Claire, thank you so much for everything. Oh, don't worry about it. When I think about how few days I have left, I realize that I should be thankful for the little things. My mother-in-law seemed to have accepted the fact that she had only a short time left to live and was spending her time peacefully. 6 months later, she passed away. I was extremely sad. I hated my mother-in-law when I first got married because she was very abusive. During the 8 years we spent together, I experienced many things. My mother-in-law had become so important to me that I could call her my second mother. I was so sad during the funeral that I could not stop crying. I am so glad that I was able to grow close to my mother-in-law and have a good time with her, even if it was only for the last few years. After my mother-in-law passed away, my husband and I were the only ones in the house. I felt lonely, as if there was a gaping hole in my heart, because I was always with my mother-in-law during the day. The fact that I was now living alone with my husband also brought light to the fact that our relationship had grown cold. We didn't have much conversation in the morning or at night, Even on days off, we never went out as a couple. My husband gradually started working more and more overtime and coming home later and later, perhaps on purpose. He also started going to work on weekends. Of course, he may be busy, but I think he also wants to spend less time with me. I was kind of getting tired of being with my husband, and I was lonely being alone now that my mother-in-law was gone, so I started working part-time. It was a good decision. I started communicating with various people there, which made me feel more relaxed, and above all, it was fun to work for the first time in a long time. And as I got to know the people at work, we would complain to each other about our husbands, which was a good stress reliever. But then, something happened that I didn't think was possible.
I want a divorce.
With that, he suddenly pushed divorce papers in my face. What do you mean? It is true that our marriage was on the rocks, but when he suddenly asked for a divorce, I was taken aback. Then my husband made a further surprising statement.
I have someone I'm in love with.
What does that mean? Are you having an affair?
Well, you could say that. Actually, I brought her here today.
What? As I said that, the doorbell rang. Then my husband opened the front door and brought in a woman. Hi, I'm Elise. It was a very young-looking woman in flashy clothes. The affair partner apparently works at a strip club. My husband is a regular customer there, and the two began having an affair.
I want to leave you and remarry her.
I felt as if I had been hit in the head. I had lived with my in-laws and did my best to take care of the housework for my husband. How could he treat me like this?
You know, we couldn't have kids, but she and I were able to have a baby.
I couldn't believe my ears. Apparently, she was pregnant with my husband's child. We have a new family member over here. So, will you back down? The woman smiled wickedly at me. This person is completely hostile towards me. I shouldn't have to relent either. With that in mind, I agreed to the divorce.
I'll give you a grace period until you leave. I'm sure you'll need it, being abandoned by your husband out of the blue.
The two of them were annoyingly excited. My husband and his partner are going to live at her house until I leave. I signed the divorce papers my husband had prepared and filed for divorce. We are strangers now. 10 days have passed since then. My ex-husband and his partner came to my house.
Hey, haven't you moved out already?
You're always so slow.
Yeah, my mother used to call her a dawdler.
That was when I was being bullied, and in the end, my mother-in-law never mentioned any such thing. The movers will be here in an hour, I replied without concern. They looked satisfied to see the cardboard boxes piled up. An hour later, the movers came and took all the boxes away.
Good. Then, get the hell out of here.
My ex-husband and his partner grinned and waved at me out. My husband had apparently forgotten a certain fact. Well, it would be more interesting if I didn't remind him as it is. I had completed the move to the new house and was living comfortably. A week later, the doorbell rang, and when I answered it, my ex-husband and his partner were there. How did they know where I was? What? How?
I followed you home from work.
That's a stalker, isn't it? They were furious. It must be about that, but I did my best to pretend I didn't know. Hey, you! What did you do? What in the world are we talking about? Don't be silly! We were living in that house and suddenly we got an eviction notice. Oh, is that so?
Don't play dumb. You must have done something.
The two of them shouted. I had no choice but to tell them the truth. Of course, because I sold that house.
What? Why did you sell it without permission?
I mean, you can't do that.
What are you talking about?
That house is mine. What? The woman exclaims in a funny voice. That house was given to me by my parents. It's in my name, so it's up to me if I want to sell it.
What?
My ex-husband finally remembered and was speechless. Then that house won't become our house?
No, it won't.
What? That's not what you promised. We got together because you said you had a house we could live in.
But I can't do anything about it.
My ex-husband and his partner started fighting, so I told them that if they made any more noise here, I would call the police. Then they ran away in a panic. But my sanction did not end there. Naturally, I demanded alimony from them. I charged them $50,000 for my ex-husband and $30,000 for the woman. And I told them something. I told them that my ex-husband was infertile and could not have children. I had suffered from being unable to have children in the past, so I forced him to have a test done as a couple. When I got the result, it was right around the time my father-in-law passed away, so I had missed the timing to tell my husband about the result. Since then, we had completely grown apart and I had failed to tell him. It seems that what I accidentally failed to tell him turned out to be a terrible bomb now. The fact that he is infertile means that the child in the partner's stomach is not his child. The two of them were in a difficult situation because of this. As a result, they decided to split. However, of course, I have demanded alimony from both of them, and I will make sure they pay it. If they fail to pay, I will seize their wages, so there will be no problem. My ex-husband, who lost his house and his partner, is living alone in a shabby apartment to pay off his debts. Also, the woman returned to her parents' house and asked them to help her raise her child and to help pay her alimony. Both of them seemed to be in hell, just as they deserved. I was hired as a full-time employee at my part-time job, and my income increased drastically. I am now living comfortably in a studio apartment and devoting myself to my work. I am not ready to give up yet, so I am going to look for a partner as I work on my career.